following clip I will play has to do with my explanations of control freaks and control being one of the major reasons people are stalked. Especially when you have groups that have training, such as intelligence agencies and law enforcement, in how to stalk people, how to have them under surveillance, how to monitor them, how to trail them, how to ghost them, how to tail them, and so on. So this is an example of what would happen when one of these gang stalkers or these control freak groups involved in covert harassment, experimentation, drugging, and stalking, were to be confronted, if they were to be confronted by revolutionaries of like minds, myself included. And keep in mind that these groups are politicians, military intelligence agencies, mental health, shrinks and psychologists who work with the government, especially the elite or big businessmen, powerful people in secret societies or snitches and gangs. This is what would happen if someone such as myself, someone like me, confronted them and exposed them. This is what would happen behind the scenes, or if they caught wind that I was exposing them.
You think you can do this to me? You motherfuckers will be playing basketball in Pelican Bay when I get finished with you. Shoot program, nigga. 23-hour lockdown. I'm the man up in this piece. You'll never see the light of who the fuck you think you fucking with.
So, a lot of you perhaps needed that to truly understand. Because you can kind of hear what I'm saying, and you don't really picture it. And then you can picture this movie that you're familiar with and say, oh yes, that does make sense that these people would take that sort of a stance. That you think you can do this to me. And that's how these people felt for the last 6 years, 6.5 years, since 2009, August, when I started exposing. Will really last 6 and a third years, really. At least, with the YouTube series alone. So yes, I think it's important that I thoroughly explore that idea of control freaks. Psychiatry is a mechanism of control. All the groups I named don't include all the gang stalkers, but they include the most obvious examples of control freaks. The other people who are gang stalking, civilian recruits, perhaps snitches in organized crime, people who work with the government in organized crime, yes. Some of them are control freaks too. Some of them are just pawns being played, Don't gain the world and lose your soul. Don't try to control the world and lose your soul. Demons love it when people feed them. They love it when people are led by unscrupulous men. This makes demons very happy. To take a religious angle for a second, but back to, what we all can appreciate as the facts. I want you to ask yourself, how could they try to play out someone like me with such a coherent, concise, perceptive argument? 10,000 valid sources. How is it possible that the system would be able to play out an extremely logical gentleman such as myself, who's the top martial artist, who put his money where his mouth is, has a degree in software engineering, and so on and so forth? How is it possible? Because it seems counterintuitive. It seems like, it seems very unlikely. Well, the answer is very simple. It's a mix of indifference, greed, fear, hate, misconceptions, people that propagate and spread despicable falsehoods, people who propound lies, people who compound the problem, people who worsen the problem, people who quicken our fate. And it's a mix of many things. To truly understand why psychiatry is a fraud, You have to break it down bit by bit, and you have to look at it from a sociological perspective. You have to consider politics, spirituality. You have to consider, economic equality, social justice. You have to consider how, the covert experimentations. You have to consider psychiatric abuse and the abuse of political dissonance. You have to consider that it is not just a conduit of, for these things. It was made with the intention of doing these things. You have to understand how secret societies came up with the ideas that we see in society. Before society was formed, people had to sit down and say, we want to make this society. And they knew that there was going to be people who did not like it, who were social deviants. And they had to think of ways to bring them under control. It's a prerequisite, for building a society, is to have a secret society plan it all out. Because if you're too open about it and you plan it in a way that's beneficial for a certain group of people or a certain class of people, you're going to have open rebellion. But if you're very covert about it, you can stifle rebellion and dissent and have more of a covert rebellion. Because not everybody knows, for example, that I'm rebelling against the system and that I'm leading the uncontrolled opposition against the system. And there's a lot of people that, the damage that the drugs have caused my brain messes up my grammar sometimes. Sometimes I even slip and say words that I didn't mean to say. In one of the videos before this, I said, organized or group stalking is, 38% of gang stalking when I meant to say stalking. There'll be little mistakes like that. Part of it is we all make those little mistakes, but they are worsened by, by the process of drugging somebody, or, psych meds and illicit drugs and any other covert drugs they use worsen this problem. Gassing people worsens the problem. When I work out, I get dizzy. I have a sore throat from all the gassing they've done. I get nauseated, sick to my stomach. I don't have long training sessions. They're reducing the durability, of my body, and the duration of my workouts. They're impairing my martial arts, and I'm still the best, And it's the same thing with my speeches and my political activities. They are impairing it, they are reducing it, but I'm still the most qualified person to do this because I have a history going back decades of being uncontrolled opposition. I am consistently sincere with what I'm doing. And my top martial artist status shows my impeccable insight, my careful perception, my spiritual and moral acuity, my moral clarity, my strong system of ethics, scruples, and values, and my history of selfless acts. And even my oath was a selfless act, for the most part. It was about the revolution. I forsake, I gave up women, intimacy, sexual pleasure, and so on and so forth, companionship, for the revolution, for God. I have a history of admitting when I'm wrong, admitting when I made an error, apologizing when I feel that I got carried away. I have a very high moral standard. I'm a man of character and principle. When you do the math, when I step outside and I look at it from a third person's point of view, when I step outside of myself, as they say, and look at it, and when I do introspection, I see these things. And I know that if I stop, then humanity has, humanity's chances of freeing itself from these oppressors are greatly reduced. So I keep going. I keep going every day. Persecuted by the scum of this earth every day. And this shows you why psychiatry is a fraud. And why is the name of this series Psychiatry is a Fraud? Why so many Psychiatry is a Fraud series? Because if there is one institution that enforces social norms the most, it will be a psychiatric institution. If there is one sector that enforces social norms the most, it will be the mental health sector. Police can do this, that, and the other thing, but really they're enforcing laws, and it's very subtle, the social norms that are, the overtones of enforcing social norms. But with mental health, the standard is openly set using what is socially normative, what they believe helps you function in society. There's a level of that in the military, there's a level of that in law enforcement and all these other things, even in organized crime and so on. But it is dramatic, it is in your face. They are being set in the first place by social engineers who are disproportionately psychologists. They coin the terms, quote unquote, scientists in general. And then mental health is the science, in a way, of behavior, which has everything to do with social norms. In a way, it is the science of social norms and how to enforce them. If that, that is the only way it's a valid science when you look at it like that. It's not a valid science when it comes to diagnosing people and, quote unquote, treating them. But it's a valid science when it comes to controlling people. That's where it's pretty much, it's very scientific. There's a scientific method. It's being applied very logically and so on and so forth, but not fairly, not righteously, but logically. Logically, this is how criminals would want to scientifically enforce social norms and social control. So when psychiatry is a fraud, it also screams that the social norms we have are not right. They're wrong. They are harmful. They are not conducive to a higher form, for a higher form of social development, of human development. They are bringing in more materialism, more control, more conformity, more assimilation. Assimilating to what? The only thing man should be assimilating to is the expectations that come down from God. And we should make very sure that we have them right. Everything else is like, okay, we shouldn't hurt each other, but we shouldn't anticipate what someone might do and then drug them before they do it. That's insane. An argument can be made for any human being on this planet that if we don't do something, that person's going to hurt somebody. Anything short of a crystal ball, or a flawless way to know when someone's going to hurt somebody is madness. It's absolute madness. There's a difference between saying, I don't think that guy, I don't like how he's behaving, he's going to hurt someone, and somebody pulling out a gun and you having to shoot him. There's a major difference. Now, obviously, the latter is not what I'm referring to. People need to get your priorities straight. You need to get your facts straight. You need to get your principles and your lifestyle straight. You need to get right with God. Psychiatry being a fraud is a huge wake-up call. There's great evils. There are great evils at work here, at play here in society. And there is an appalling amount of indifference allowing them to continue. And it goes from country to country on continents. It's contiguous on continents. Okay, one country to the next. Our social norms in Canada are very similar. Our social norms and Mexico's are more and more similar every day. It's contiguous when it starts. It spreads. And spreads where things are close first and spreads out. Well, I'm out of time now. I think you all need to consider everything I'm saying very carefully and how far a righteous man should go. A righteous man should stop at nothing to be a man of principle and to uphold what's right. Groups that have training such as intelligence agencies and law enforcement, in how to stalk people, how to have them under surveillance, how to monitor them, how to trail them, how to ghost them, how to tail them, and so on. So, intelligence agencies, mental health, shrinks and psychologists who work with the government, especially the elite or big businessmen, powerful people in secret societies or snitches and gangs. This is what would happen if someone such as myself, someone like me, confronted them. And the following clip I will play has to do with my explanations of control freaks, and control being one of the major reasons people are stalked. Especially when you have... This is an example of what would happen when one of these gang stalkers or these control freak groups involved in covert harassment, experimentation, drugging, and stalking, were to be confronted, if they were to be confronted by revolutionaries of like minds, myself included. And keep in mind that these groups are politicians, military intelligence,